The clock on Doctor's office wall ticked loudly, each second feeling like an eternity to Sarah Mitchell. She sat rigid in the uncomfortable leather chair, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her fingernails digging into her palms. Across from her, behind an imposing mahogany desk, Doctor removed her reading glasses and set them down with deliberate care. It was a gesture Sarah had learned to dread. That particular movement always preceded bad news or, worse, another dead end. "Selective mutism," Doctor said softly, her voice carrying the weight of certainty. "That's what we're dealing with." Sarah had heard these words before, from Dr. Richardson, the pediatrician, from Doctor, the child psychologist, and from Doctor, the neurologist. But hearing it again from this fourth specialist made it feel devastatingly real. The diagnosis didn't change anything. It just gave a clinical name to the nightmare she'd been living for the past 7 months. "What does that mean, exactly?" Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. She'd spent countless hours researching late into the night, her eyes burning as she scrolled through medical journals and parent forums, desperately searching for answers, for hope, for anything that might bring her daughter's voice back. "It means Emma can speak," Doctor explained, her tone gentle but clinical. "She has no physical impediment to speech. Her vocal cords work perfectly, but anxiety, severe anxiety, prevents her from speaking in certain social situations. It's like her fear literally locks her voice away. She becomes trapped in silence, unable to communicate, even though mentally she wants to." Sarah felt tears welling up, hot and bitter behind her eyes. She blinked rapidly, trying to maintain composure. "But we've tried everything. The therapy sessions, the medications, bringing her to social situations slowly. Nothing is working." Doctor leaned back in her chair, her expression sympathetic but professional. "I won't lie to you, Ms. Mitchell. Selective mutism is challenging. Most children respond to traditional cognitive behavioral therapy over time, but some cases are more resistant. Emma seems to be one of those more complicated cases. The anxiety appears to be deeply rooted, possibly stemming from a traumatic experience or a combination of factors." Sarah's mind flashed back to the incident 2 years ago, the house fire in their neighborhood just 3 blocks away. Emma had been outside playing with other children when the sirens started wailing. She wasn't harmed, hadn't been in danger, but she'd seen the chaos, the fear on adults' faces, the red flames lighting up the sky. Sarah had thought her daughter had recovered well from the incident. She'd seemed fine. But perhaps trauma worked differently in young minds, embedding itself quietly, waiting to emerge in unexpected ways. 7 months ago, Emma had stopped speaking. Not suddenly, it was more like a gradual withdrawal. First, she stopped talking at preschool, then in stores, then around her cousins. Within weeks, she was barely speaking at home, communicating only in whispers to her mother and her stuffed animals. Sarah remembered the panic that had seized her when she first realized something was seriously wrong. She'd rushed Emma to the pediatrician, convinced something neurological was happening, that her daughter had suffered a stroke or some unseen injury. When the physical examinations came back normal, Sarah's fear had transmuted into desperate determination. Over the following months, she'd tried everything. She'd enrolled Emma in play therapy, behavioral therapy, and even attempted exposure therapy by gently pushing her daughter into social situations. Each attempt felt like hitting her head against an invisible wall. Emma would panic, her small body trembling, her face flushing red, her throat seemingly closing shut. The more Sarah pushed, the more Emma retreated. The financial toll had been staggering. Sarah worked as a marketing manager, and her health insurance covered some therapy sessions, but not all. She'd spent thousands of dollars out of pocket, money that should have gone toward Emma's college fund, toward their mortgage, toward building their future. But what good was financial security if her daughter was imprisoned in her own silence? So Sarah had paid. She'd paid gladly, desperately, willing to bankrupt herself if it meant getting her child back. She'd also paid an emotional toll that was harder to quantify. Sarah had become hypervigilant, analyzing every interaction Emma had, looking for triggers, for clues, for anything that might explain why her vibrant, chatty daughter, the girl who used to sing in the grocery store and narrate her own adventures, had become this silent, anxious shadow. "What would you recommend?" Sarah asked Doctor, her voice barely above a whisper. "Continue the therapy. Consider a higher dosage of her current anxiety medication, though I must warn you that medication alone rarely solves selective mutism. Some children respond well to pressure reduction, backing off social situations, creating safe spaces where they can be silent without judgment. Others respond better to gradual, pressure-free exposure. Every child is different. Every case is unique." Every case is unique. Sarah had heard this phrase dozens of times, and each time it felt like a subtle admission. We don't really know how to fix this. Your daughter's case is beyond our standard protocols. That evening, Sarah returned home to their small two-bedroom house in the suburbs. Emma was with Mrs., their neighbor, who watched her after preschool. When Sarah picked her up, Emma smiled at her mother and hugged her leg but didn't speak. They drove home in silence, Emma staring out the window and Sarah fighting back tears. After putting Emma to bed, she drifted off to sleep without speaking a single word. Sarah collapsed on the couch. She opened her laptop and scrolled mindlessly through social media, trying to distract herself from the crushing weight of hopelessness. That's when she saw it, a post from the Riverside Park Community Facebook group, a blue and white flyer announcing a police K-9 demonstration scheduled for the following Saturday. Sarah clicked on the image, enlarging it. A handsome German shepherd with alert, intelligent eyes stared at the camera. "Come meet Valor and Officer," the caption read. "Learn about police K-9 units and meet our community heroes." Something stirred in Sarah's chest. It was small, fragile, barely more than a whisper of an idea. But it was hope. Real, physical, unfamiliar hope. She'd read somewhere about therapy dogs helping children with anxiety. She'd seen news stories about emotional support animals. What if, just what if, something unexpected, something outside the clinical bubble of therapists and medications and carefully controlled exposure therapy, could reach her daughter? Sarah printed the flyer at midnight, her hands shaking slightly as she did. She taped it to the refrigerator, right next to Emma's artwork and preschool photos. She stared at that German shepherd's face for a long time, searching his intelligent eyes for answers he didn't have. Tomorrow, she decided. Tomorrow everything would be different. Tomorrow she'd take Emma to that park and they'd see what happened. Because what did they have to lose? They'd already tried everything else. Maybe what Emma needed wasn't another doctor or another therapy session. Maybe what her daughter needed was something extraordinary, something unexpected, something that loved unconditionally and asked nothing in return but presence. For the first time in months, Sarah felt something shift inside her, not certainty, but the first fragile seed of genuine hope. Saturday morning arrived dressed in brilliant sunshine. Golden light streamed through the kitchen windows as Sarah made Emma's favorite breakfast, scrambled eggs with a smiley face made from blueberries for eyes and a strawberry for a mouth. Emma sat in her high chair, swinging her legs rhythmically against the wooden frame, watching her mother with those serious, observant eyes that seemed far too old for a 3-year-old. "We're going to do something special today, baby," Sarah said, keeping her voice light and casual though her heart was thundering in her chest. She'd spent half the night preparing, worrying, second-guessing whether this was a good idea. What if it was too overwhelming? What if it made Emma's anxiety worse? What if her daughter regressed further into silence? But Emma responded by tilting her head slightly, a gesture Sarah had come to recognize as curiosity. The girl reached for a blueberry from her plate and popped it into her mouth, her eyes never leaving her mother's face. Sarah pulled out the flyer she'd printed and stuck on the refrigerator. "We're going to meet a dog," she said. "A very special police dog named Valor. He's a helper dog. He helps police officers catch bad guys and keep people safe." Emma's eyes widened slightly. She set down her fork and pointed at the paper. She whispered, her voice so quiet it was barely audible, Even this tiny syllable, this minimal vocalization, felt like a victory. Sarah's eyes stung with unshed tears. Yes, sweetheart, a dog. A big, beautiful dog. They arrived at Riverside Park at 10:47 a.m., 13 minutes earlier than planned. Sarah was always early, a nervous habit she couldn't shake. The parking lot was already filling up with families, couples, and small groups of people gathering on the expansive lawn that stretched toward the park's central pavilion. The late September weather was perfect, warm enough to be comfortable, but with a gentle breeze that carried the scent of freshly cut grass and the faint aroma of someone's grilled hot dogs from a nearby picnic. Sarah lifted Emma out of her car seat and set her on the ground. The girl was dressed in her favorite pink dress with embroidered butterflies, the one Sarah had chosen specifically to make Emma feel confident. She'd even brushed her daughter's dark hair into neat pigtails. Emma clung to her mother's leg as they approached the growing crowd, her small fingers gripping Sarah's jeans with fierce intensity. "It's okay, baby," Sarah murmured, running her hand over Emma's head. "We're just going to watch. We don't have to do anything you don't want to do." The crowd was larger than Sarah had anticipated. She counted at least 70 or 80 people gathered on the lawn, sitting on blankets, standing in small clusters, children running in excited circles. The energy was festive, almost carnival-like. A portable stage had been set up with a microphone, and banners reading Community K9 Day and Riverside Police Department fluttered in the breeze. At precisely 11:00 a.m., a tall man in a crisp police uniform walked onto the stage. Officer was striking, probably in his mid-40s, with salt and pepper hair, a strong jawline, and an air of quiet confidence that immediately commanded attention. But it wasn't Officer who captured everyone's focus. It was the German Shepherd walking beside him. Valor was magnificent. The dog's coat gleamed like burnished bronze in the sunlight, perfectly groomed and radiating health and vitality. His posture was alert, his ears perked forward, his dark eyes intelligent and aware. Despite his imposing size, there was something noble about him, something that made the crowd instinctively lean forward with interest. "Good morning, everyone," Officer's voice boomed across the lawn, warm and genuine. "Welcome to Community K9 Day. I'm Officer and this is my partner, Valor. We're so excited to spend the day with all of you." The crowd applauded. Children squealed with delight. Emma's grip on Sarah's jeans tightened. Officer began his presentation with impressive professionalism. He explained Valor's training, the hundreds of hours spent teaching him to detect narcotics, to track missing persons, to apprehend suspects safely. He demonstrated the dog's obedience, commanding Valor to sit, lay down, heel, and perform a perfect standstay. Each command was executed with impressive precision. The audience watched, rapt with attention. Sarah felt Emma's body gradually relax against her leg, though her daughter remained silent. The girl's eyes were fixed on Valor, following the dog's every movement. Sarah couldn't tell if Emma was comfortable or simply transfixed. Sometimes, with her daughter's selective mutism, it was impossible to distinguish between interest and anxiety. "Valor has saved lives," Officer continued, his voice taking on a more serious tone. 3 years ago, a 6-year-old boy wandered away from his home during the night. His parents woke to find his bed empty. We organized a search, but hours were passing and night turned into morning. Valor's handler took him to the last known location, and this dog tracked the boy's scent for nearly 2 miles through woods, across a stream, and to an abandoned barn where the child had taken shelter. Officer paused, letting the weight of the story settle over the crowd. That boy is 8 years old now, healthy and safe, because of Valor's abilities. The crowd murmured appreciatively. Several people were wiping their eyes. Sarah found herself holding her breath, conscious of Emma pressed against her leg, conscious that her daughter's eyes were still locked on the dog. Then something unexpected happened. Officer had finished his formal demonstration and was preparing to take questions from the audience. Valor sat obediently beside the officer, his alert eyes scanning the crowd with that characteristic intelligent gaze that made him seem almost human. The dog's head turned, not dramatically, not in response to a command, but naturally, organically, and his eyes found Emma. Time seemed to stop. Valor's gaze locked directly with the small girl hiding behind her mother's leg. The dog's ears perked forward slightly, and his body language shifted. To an untrained observer, it might have seemed like nothing, just a dog looking at a child in a crowd. But Sarah felt it. She felt the moment shift, felt the air change, felt something intangible pass between her daughter and this remarkable animal. "Emma," Sarah whispered, bending down slightly, "look at me, sweetie." But Emma didn't look at her mother. Emma's eyes remained fixed on Valor, and Valor's eyes remained fixed on Emma. They stared at each other across the crowd, a 3-year-old girl who hadn't spoken to anyone outside her immediate family in 7 months, and a police dog who had no way of knowing about human emotional disorders, human trauma, or human pain. And yet somehow in that moment, some form of recognition seemed to pass between them, an acknowledgement perhaps, or an invitation. Sarah's heart began to race. Her palms grew damp. She had no idea what was about to happen, but she knew with certainty that something was shifting. The universe was tilting on its axis, though no one but her seemed to notice. Officer had moved to the side of the stage, beginning to answer questions from audience members. But his eyes, too, had caught that moment between dog and child. His expression changed, subtle, but Sarah caught it. His professional demeanor softened with something like recognition, and he turned his full attention toward the small girl in the pink butterfly dress. The crowd around them continued to mill about, oblivious. But in that frozen moment, everything was poised on the edge of transformation. Sarah could feel it. Emma could feel it. And Valor, with his remarkable capacity to read human emotion, could definitely feel it. The only question now was, what would happen next? Officer had been working with police canines for 23 years. He'd trained with military dogs, federal agents, and international law enforcement. He'd spent thousands of hours studying canine behavior, reading body language, understanding the intricate dance between human emotion and animal instinct. But nothing quite prepared you for those rare moments when you felt something shift in the universe, when the professional knowledge dissolved away and pure intuition took over. He felt it now, watching the small girl in the pink butterfly dress. The presentation had been going well, the crowd engaged and enthusiastic. But the moment Valor's gaze found that child, something changed. Officer had seen it countless times in his career, dogs possessing an almost supernatural ability to detect human suffering, to sense anxiety and fear the way they might sense a hidden drug or an escaped suspect. Valor wasn't just looking at the girl. He was reading her, understanding her. And his body language had shifted from obedient performer to something else entirely, something more primal, more purposeful. Sarah Mitchell noticed it too, though she couldn't have articulated exactly what she was observing. She just knew that the energy between her daughter and this remarkable dog felt significant, weighted with possibility. Officer made a decision in that moment, the kind of decision that separated good officers from great ones. He held up a hand to the audience member who was about to ask a question, his eyes never leaving Emma. "Excuse me for just one moment," he said, his voice warm but purposeful. The crowd quieted. Confused murmurs rippled through the gathered families. Officer simply nodded to his partner, a subtle gesture that communicated more than words ever could. He and Valor stepped down from the stage, not moving directly toward Emma, but at an angle, giving her space, giving her options. Sarah's mouth went dry. Her protective instincts immediately spiked. She placed both hands on Emma's shoulders, ready to move her daughter away if necessary. "It's okay, sweetheart," she whispered, unsure if she was reassuring Emma or herself. Officer didn't make eye contact with Sarah or Emma. That was deliberate, an instinctive understanding that direct eye contact might feel threatening to an already anxious child. Instead, He brought his attention to Valor, speaking to the dog in low, calm tones. "Easy, boy, easy. Let's just say hello," he murmured, his voice carrying across the park with a soothing quality that seemed to settle over the crowd like a warm blanket. The crowd sensed something happening. The ambient chatter died down. Parents who had been distracted by their own children suddenly turned their attention to the unfolding scene. This wasn't part of the planned presentation. This was something spontaneous, something real. Valor began to move, but not in the brisk, obedient manner he displayed during the formal demonstration. This was different. The dog moved slowly, deliberately, his body language softening. His ears, which had been perked forward in alert attention, relaxed slightly. His powerful chest lowered. Officer took several steps, then knelt on one knee on the grass, bringing himself to a lower height, making himself appear less imposing. "That's right, buddy. We're just going to sit for a moment," Officer said softly, kneeling beside his partner. Valor came to rest beside him, but the dog's eyes remained fixed on Emma. Sarah felt her daughter's breathing change. Emma's grip on Sarah's jeans had become almost painful, her small fingers digging through the denim into her mother's leg. But she hadn't moved away. She hadn't hidden her face or pulled back toward the crowds. She stood frozen, her eyes locked with Valor's, her small chest rising and falling with increasingly rapid breaths. "It's okay, Emma. It's okay," Sarah whispered, though she realized she was speaking as much to herself as to her daughter. Her own heart was racing. She understood what was happening here. This was no ordinary moment. This was an intersection of need and intuition, of broken pieces potentially finding their way back together. Officer remained kneeling, not commanding, not coercing, simply being present. His deep voice carried across the silent park. "Sometimes the best thing we can do is just wait," he said, speaking to the crowd but truly speaking to Emma. "Some friendships take a minute to grow. Some connections need a little time and patience." Minutes stretched out, literally minutes. In the modern world where attention spans measured in seconds, where everything moved at the speed of social media and instant gratification, Officer simply knelt beside his dog and waited. He didn't perform tricks. He didn't demonstrate Valor's obedience. He simply existed in patient silence. The crowd had become completely still. Even the children had stopped running. Everyone seemed to sense that something profound was unfolding, something that couldn't be rushed or forced. Emma's breathing began to slow. Sarah could feel it, the gradual shift from panic breathing to something more controlled. The girl's fingers unclenched slightly from Sarah's jeans. Her body, which had been rigidly tense, began to soften incrementally. "Would it be okay if we came a little closer?" Officer asked gently, speaking directly to Sarah for the first time. His tone held such compassion, such understanding, that Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. She nodded, not trusting her voice. "Yes," she managed to whisper. "Yes, that's okay." Officer rose slowly to his feet. He didn't hurry. He moved with deliberate calm, each step measured and purposeful. Valor remained beside him, the dog's intelligent eyes never wavering from Emma's face. They approached at an angle, not directly, giving Emma multiple opportunities to move away, to retreat, to reject this encounter if it became too overwhelming. But Emma didn't retreat. She stood rooted to the spot, her small body trembling, her breathing rapid but no longer panicked. There was something else in her expression now. Beneath the anxiety, beneath the fear, there was curiosity. There was openness. There was the smallest seed of something that looked almost like hope. Officer knelt again, this time at a distance of perhaps 8 feet from Emma and Sarah. "This is Valor," he said softly. "He's a good listener. He doesn't need anyone to talk. He just likes to be near people he cares about." Something in those words pierced through the protective barrier Sarah had built around her heart. Here was this man, this stranger, acknowledging something profound about her daughter's condition without judgment, without clinical language, without the heavy weight of diagnosis and disorder. He understood. He truly understood. Emma took a single step forward, then another. Sarah's hand hovered near her daughter's shoulder, ready to pull her back if needed, but not forcing anything, just being present, just being available. With each small step forward, the gap between Emma and Valor closed. The dog's tail began to wag gently, an instinctive response that seemed to further encourage the brave little girl in the pink butterfly dress. Officer remained perfectly still, reading Valor's body language, reading Emma's body language, orchestrating this delicate dance between human need and animal healing with the skill of a maestro. Emma was now close enough that she could reach out and touch the dog if she chose to. The crowd held its breath. Officer's eyes met Sarah's across the space between them, and in that look there was complete understanding. This moment belonged to Emma and Valor now. The rest of the world was simply privileged to witness it. Time moved differently now. Each second felt stretched, elastic, infinite. Emma stood at the precipice of something, her small 3-year-old body trembling with barely contained emotion. She was approximately 3 feet away from Valor now, close enough to see the individual hairs of the dog's coat, close enough to see the intelligence reflected in his dark eyes, close enough to see her own fear reflected back at her, and something else. Something that looked almost like recognition. Valor's tail continued its gentle wag, a metronome of encouragement. The dog's body remained perfectly calm, his posture open and non-threatening. He was a trained police K9, accustomed to high-stress situations and dangerous encounters. Yet in this moment, he was somehow able to recognize that the threat here wasn't external or criminal. It was internal, the threat of a child's own mind turning against her, of anxiety becoming a cage. Sarah's hand remained on her daughter's shoulder, barely touching, offering presence rather than pressure. She was hardly breathing, afraid that any movement, any sound, any disruption of this delicate moment might shatter whatever fragile magic was occurring. Officer watched from his kneeling position, his face peaceful, his eyes reflecting something that looked like profound understanding. He'd seen many police dogs perform extraordinary tasks, tracking suspects through dense forests, detecting hidden explosives, finding lost children in the wilderness. But this, he knew, was different. This was the quiet heroism of simply being present with another being's pain. Emma lifted her right hand. The movement was slow, deliberate, as though her arm weighed 1,000 pounds. Her small fingers, pink-nailed, tiny as a baby bird's feet, trembled visibly as she extended her arm toward Valor's fur. Sarah could see the internal battle playing out across her daughter's face. Every instinct born of anxiety was screaming at Emma to pull back, to retreat, to hide. But something stronger, something that transcended fear, something that spoke in the language that predated human speech, was drawing her forward. Valor didn't move. He understood with the intuitive wisdom that dogs possess that this moment belonged to the child. Any movement from him might startle her, might break the spell. So he simply remained patient and present, a living invitation to connection. Emma's fingers made contact with Valor's fur. For a fraction of a second, nothing happened. Then Valor's tail wagged slightly more enthusiastically, and his head tilted in a gesture that somehow communicated approval, encouragement, celebration. And then, a sound erupted from Emma's throat. It started as barely more than a breath, a soft exhalation, but it rapidly transformed into something unmistakable. A giggle. Pure, genuine, unguarded, spontaneous laughter from a child who hadn't made this sound, hadn't made any sound in public in 7 months. "Oh my God," someone in the crowd whispered. Sarah felt something break open inside her chest. Her knees literally buckled, and she had to grip Emma's shoulder for balance. Hot tears erupted from her eyes without warning, streaming down her face in waves of emotion too large and too powerful to contain. 7 months. 7 months of silence. 7 months of watching her child retreat further and further into herself. And now, in this moment, on this ordinary Saturday morning at a community park, her daughter's voice had returned. The giggle continued. Emma's face transformed, her eyes widening, her mouth opening in genuine delight. Her small fingers continued to stroke Valor's soft fur, marveling at the texture, at the reality of this magnificent animal beneath her hands. Her breathing came faster, lighter, filled with wonder rather than anxiety. "Good girl," Officer said softly, his own voice thick with emotion. "That's so good, Emma. That's perfect." The crowd had begun to stir. Parents were nudging each other. Children who had been standing silently were now whispering excitedly. Several people had their phones out, capturing the moment, but somehow the presence of documentation didn't diminish the authenticity of what was happening. This was real. This was transcendent. This was the kind of moment that people would remember for the rest of their lives. Emma was still giggling, still stroking Valor's fur, still lost in the wonder of this connection. The dog turned his head and gently licked her hand once, twice, a gesture that sent the little girl into fresh peals of delighted laughter. It was the sound of joy. It was the sound of walls crumbling. It was the sound of a child finding her voice again. Sarah sank to her knees beside her daughter, no longer able to stand under the weight of her emotions. She pulled Emma into her arms, holding her tightly, feeling her daughter's small body shaking with laughter and emotion. Sarah's tears soaked into Emma's dark hair as she rocked her gently. "I love you so much, baby," Sarah whispered, her voice breaking. "I love you so much." "Valor," Emma said clearly, pulling back from her mother's embrace, her eyes still fixed on the dog. She said his name. She spoke the word with perfect clarity and certainty. Sarah felt her heart physically lurch. Officer's eyes were glistening now too. He remained kneeling, giving this moment its full space, its full dignity. He understood what had just occurred. It wasn't magic, not in the supernatural sense. It was something more profound. It was the meeting of two beings, one human and one animal, both capable of sensing when another needed exactly what they could offer. Emma needed unconditional acceptance, non-judgmental presence, and the simple companionship of another living being who asked nothing of her except that she be herself. And Valor, with his decades of training and his natural empathy, had somehow understood this instantly. "Would you like to pet him some more?" Officer asked gently, addressing Emma directly. Emma looked up at her mother, her eyes shining with unshed tears of joy, her face flushed with emotion. "Can I?" she asked, her voice still quiet but unmistakably present, unmistakably real. "Of course, sweetheart," Sarah said, fresh tears streaming down her face. "You can pet him as long as you want." Emma turned back to Valor, running her small hands over the dog's head, his neck, his back. She was murmuring to him now soft words that Sarah could barely hear but that were undeniably present. Emma was speaking. Her daughter was speaking. The crowd was completely silent now, witnessing something sacred, something that transcended entertainment or spectacle. This was a moment when the invisible walls of anxiety came crashing down, when a child's voice found its way back into the world. Valor remained perfectly still, his tail wagging gently, his eyes soft with what could only be described as love or profound compassion. Officer watched the interaction with an expression of quiet wonder, understanding that he was witnessing something that would change all three of them, the mother, the child, and the dog, forever. This was the moment. This was the breakthrough. This was when everything changed. As Sarah drove home from the park that Saturday, Emma sat in her car seat with her small hand pressed against the window, her lips moving silently as if she were still speaking to Valor even though they were now 3 miles away. Sarah reached back and squeezed her daughter's knee gently, her own eyes still glistening with residual tears. "Can we go back tomorrow?" Emma asked suddenly, her voice quiet but unmistakably hopeful. Sarah's heart clenched. She wanted to say yes immediately, but she also knew that Officer likely had other commitments, other responsibilities beyond community demonstrations. "I'm not sure if Officer will be at the park tomorrow, sweetheart, but we can definitely ask him." That evening, Sarah did something she'd never done before. She found the Riverside Police Department's website and scrolled through until she located an email address for the K-9 unit. Her hands trembled slightly as she typed. "Dear officer," she wrote, "I wanted to thank you for today. My daughter Emma has selective mutism and hasn't spoken in public in 7 months. Your dog, Valor, did something extraordinary today." Emma laughed. She spoke. She was herself again, at least for a moment. "Would there be any possibility of our visiting again? Same time next week. I understand if this isn't possible, but I wanted to ask." She hit send before she could overthink it. The response arrived the next morning at 7:32 a.m. "Dear Ms. Mitchell," it read, "I would be honored to see Emma again next Saturday. Please come at 11 a.m. I'll make sure both Valor and I are there. This is exactly why I do this job. See you then. Officer." Sarah read the email 3 times, each time feeling fresh waves of gratitude wash over her. She printed it out and taped it to the refrigerator next to the original flyer. The following Saturday arrived with almost agonizing slowness. Emma had asked approximately 47 times if it was time to go to the park yet. Sarah had packed a small bag with snacks, water, and a blanket, and they arrived at Riverside Park at 10:45 a.m. Early again, a nervous habit Sarah couldn't break. Officer and Valor were already there, sitting on the grass near the pavilion, waiting. When Valor saw Emma, the dog's tail began wagging immediately, and Officer stood to greet them with a warm smile. "Emma," he said, "I'm so happy to see you again." "Hi, Officer," Emma said, her voice still quiet but noticeably stronger than it had been the week before. "Hi, Valor." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. Each small vocalization was a victory, a brick in the foundation of her daughter's recovery. They spent the entire Saturday morning together. Officer sat with Emma and Sarah on the blanket, answering Emma's questions about Valor's training, his favorite foods, his daily routine. Emma asked questions, multiple questions, about the dog, about the police work, about Officer's job. And with each question, her voice became slightly less hesitant, slightly more confident. "Can Valor sit?" Emma asked at one point. Officer nodded to the dog and Valor sat immediately. Emma giggled and clapped her hands. "Good dog, good boy." By the end of their visit, Emma was having something approaching a normal conversation with Officer, her voice still naturally quiet but no longer imprisoned by anxiety. The following week they returned, and the week after that, and the week after that. The Saturday ritual became the anchor point of Emma's week. Sarah noticed profound changes in her daughter. At home, Emma was speaking more, narrating her play, asking questions, singing softly to herself while coloring. At preschool, according to her teacher, Emma had begun raising her hand during story time, though she wasn't yet speaking in class. But the teacher noted that Emma was participating in group activities rather than isolating herself. Dr. Emma's therapist noticed the changes immediately at their next session. "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it," she told Sarah, genuine amazement reflected in her professional demeanor. "I've been working with children with selective mutism for 15 years, and I rarely see progress this rapid. Emma's anxiety levels have decreased noticeably. Her willingness to engage socially has increased exponentially. This is remarkable." By the 5th week, Emma was comfortable enough to bring Officer a drawing she'd made, a picture of herself and Valor, both smiling, both surrounded by hearts and stars. "This is beautiful," Officer said, examining the artwork with genuine appreciation. "Can I put this on my office wall?" "Yes," Emma said enthusiastically, "and then you can see me and Valor every day." Officer exchanged a meaningful look with Sarah. They both understood the significance of this moment. Emma was no longer just speaking. She was thinking about future moments, future connections, imagining herself as part of Officer's life beyond these Saturday visits. By the 8th week, Emma had made a friend, a boy named also 3 years old who came to the park with his grandfather. Emma and played together quietly while Officer and Sarah watched. And most importantly, Emma actually spoke to, invited him to pet Valor, asked him questions, included him in her world. Sarah found herself sitting on the grass one Saturday, watching her daughter interact with another child and a remarkable dog, and she allowed herself to cry tears of pure gratitude. The therapists, the medications, the clinical interventions, they had all been necessary, all had played their role. But this unexpected connection between a child and an animal had been the catalyst that transformed everything. One Saturday, about 10 weeks into their ritual, Officer brought a surprise. He'd had professional photographs taken, pictures of Emma and Valor together, shots of her petting the dog, images of her laughing. He presented them to Sarah in a small album. "These are for you," he said simply, "so you never forget what it looks like when someone finds their voice again." Sarah held the album to her chest, overwhelmed. She opened it carefully and studied each photograph. There was Emma in her pink butterfly dress, her face transformed by joy and confidence. There was Valor, his gentle eyes reflecting the love he clearly felt for this small human. And there, in the background of several photos, was Officer, his face filled with quiet satisfaction. Emma's vocabulary expanded. She went from single words to short sentences to actual conversations. She began asking Officer about his childhood, about why he became a police officer, about his family. She was curious about the world again, engaged with life again, present in a way she hadn't been for over a year. And every single Saturday, without fail, Sarah and Emma returned to Riverside Park at 11 a.m. They sat with Officer and Valor, and they participated in a healing ritual that none of them had fully understood at the beginning, but that all of them now recognized as sacred. The weekly ritual wasn't just helping Emma recover her voice. It was helping Sarah rebuild her faith in possibility. It was helping Officer understand the profound ways in which his work extended far beyond police investigations and criminal apprehension. And it was helping Valor understand that he was, in many ways, more than just a police dog. He was a healer, a bridge, a guide helping a lost child find her way back to herself. 3 months had passed since that first Saturday at the park. Emma had become a different child. The transformation was no longer subtle or incremental. It was dramatic and unmistakable. She sang in public. She spoke to cashiers at grocery stores. She participated actively in preschool. Her teachers had contacted Sarah multiple times, expressing amazement at the shift in her behavior and confidence. One Saturday in mid-December, Officer approached Sarah with a proposal. "I was thinking," he said carefully, watching Emma play with Valor on the grass, "that it might be nice for Emma to see the police station, to meet some of the other officers in the K-9 unit, to understand the place where Valor lives and works. What do you think? Would that be something Emma might enjoy?" Sarah's immediate instinct was to say yes, but she also knew the importance of proceeding carefully with her daughter. She knelt beside Emma and posed the idea. Emma's eyes widened. "Can we really go inside the police station?" "If you'd like to," Sarah said. "Officer works there. Would you want to see where Valor stays?" "Yes," Emma said immediately, then added with characteristic thoughtfulness, "Can I bring Valor a treat?" Officer smiled warmly. "I think that's a wonderful idea." They scheduled the tour for the following Saturday, 1 hour after their usual park visit. Sarah found herself surprisingly nervous as they pulled into the police station parking lot. The building was imposing, gray concrete, official signage, an aura of authority that Sarah associated with serious business and adult concerns. She wondered if Emma would find it intimidating. But Emma stepped out of the car with quiet confidence, the bag of dog treats clutched in her small hand. "Are you ready, Valor?" Emma asked, looking up at the dog who had ridden with them in the vehicle. "This is your home." Valor's tail wagged as if in agreement. Officer met them at the entrance and led them inside, the automatic doors sliding open with a soft whoosh. The interior was cleaner and more organized than Sarah had expected. Officer guided them past the front desk, where he stopped to introduce Emma to the desk sergeant, Sergeant Williams, a large black woman with kind eyes and an immediate warm smile. "This is Emma," Officer said. "Emma, this is Sergeant Williams. She helps keep everything organized around here." "Hi, Emma," Sergeant Williams said warmly. "Officer has told us all about you. We're so happy to meet you." Sarah held her breath, waiting to see if Emma would respond. Social interactions with strangers could still trigger some anxiety, though it was now manageable rather than paralyzing. "Hi," Emma said clearly, then added, "Valor is a very good dog." Sergeant Williams' face lit up. "He sure is, and I bet you're a very good friend to him." They proceeded deeper into the station. Officer led them to the K-9 unit's office area, where 4 other officers were working at desks, reviewing files and making reports. When Officer entered with Emma and Valor, the entire atmosphere seemed to shift. The officers looked up with expressions of warm anticipation, and Sarah realized that Officer had clearly prepared them for this visit. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet Emma," Officer announced. "Emma, these are Officers Martinez and Jackson. They all work with their own K-9 partners." Emma looked around the room, her eyes wide but not fearful. "Where are their dogs?" she asked. "Their dogs are in their kennels right now," Officer explained. "We can visit them if you'd like, but first, Emma wanted to give Valor something." Emma stepped forward and handed Officer the bag of treats with solemn ceremony. "For Valor," she said formally, "so he knows I'm thinking about him even when I'm not at the park." Officer Martinez, a middle-aged man with warm brown eyes, knelt down to Emma's level. "That's very thoughtful, Emma. You know what? Valor is a lucky dog to have such a good friend." "Can I pet the other dogs?" Emma asked, addressing the room with a confidence that made Sarah's heart swell. For the next hour, Emma became a tour guide of sorts, visiting each K-9 handler's dog, learning their names and their stories. Officer's German Shepherd, Duke, was retired and lived at home. Officer's Belgian Storm was a narcotics detection dog. Officer Jackson's Labrador, Scout, specialized in tracking. Emma listened intently to each officer's description of their dog's work, asked questions, and petted each animal with the gentle reverence she'd learned from Valor. The officers watched this small girl interact with their dogs, and Sarah noticed several of them exchanging meaningful glances with Officer. They understood what was happening here. They recognized that they were witnessing something extraordinary. Then Officer did something Sarah hadn't anticipated. He brought out Doctor, who had apparently been invited to observe the visit. The therapist stepped into the K-9 office with a video camera. "Emma," Doctor said warmly, "Officer asked if I could come today and record your visit. He wants to document your progress. Is that okay with you?" Emma nodded, showing no signs of camera shyness or anxiety. "Can I tell you about Valor?" she asked. For the next 20 minutes, Emma spoke directly to the camera, describing her journey. She talked about being scared, about not being able to talk, about the day she met Valor at the park. She described how Valor had helped her find her voice again. She spoke clearly, eloquently, with the kind of emotional intelligence that seemed far beyond her 3 years of age. "I was sad," Emma said to the camera, her small face serious and contemplative. "But Valor made me happy. Valor helped me be brave, and now I can talk to everyone." Sarah's eyes filled with tears watching her daughter speak these words. This was the child who, just 4 months ago, couldn't produce a single vocalization in public. This was the child who had been locked inside herself by anxiety so profound that 4 different specialists had struggled to reach her. When the recording finished, Doctor immediately pulled Officer aside. Sarah overheard fragments of their conversation. "This is clinical impossibility," Doctor was saying. "The recovery rate, the timeline, the completeness of the improvement, it's beyond what conventional treatment typically achieves. Officer, What you and Valor have done here is remarkable. Have you ever considered formalizing this? Creating an actual therapeutic program?" Officer glanced at Emma, who was now showing Scout how to shake hands, the dog's large paw resting gently in her small hand. When he turned back to Doctor, there was a thoughtful expression on his face. "Actually," he said slowly, "I've been thinking about exactly that." The officers in the room had gathered around now, listening to the conversation. Sarah sensed that something important was being discussed, something that extended far beyond Emma's individual recovery. Officer Martinez stepped forward. "I'm in," he said simply. "If we can help other kids the way Valor has helped Emma, count me in." "Me too," Officer added. Officer and Officer Jackson nodded their agreement. Officer turned to Sarah with an expression that contained equal parts hope and possibility. "What if we could do this for more children?" he asked. "What if we could create a formal program that pairs children with anxiety disorders and speech issues with K-9 officers and their dogs? What if we could replicate this for other families?" Sarah felt something shift inside her. She looked at her daughter, who was now demonstrating how to pet Scout gently, speaking to the officer about the dog's training, completely at ease in this environment of authority and power. And she understood that Emma's individual healing was beautiful and important, but it could be so much more. "Yes," Sarah said softly. "Yes, absolutely. How do we make this happen?" The story broke on a Wednesday evening in January. Sarah was sitting in her living room checking her email when she received a message from Officer with the subject line, "Local news is interested." The message contained contact information for Jennifer Martinez, an investigative journalist at Channel 7 News who had heard whispers about a remarkable case involving a police dog and a child with selective mutism. She wanted to feature the story on the evening news. Sarah's first instinct was hesitation. She valued their privacy, valued the quiet Saturday rituals with Officer and Valor. Going public felt like it might disrupt the sacred space they'd created. But she also knew that Officer was moving forward with formalizing the program, and media coverage could only help that effort. She called Officer. "What do you think?" she asked. "Should we do the interview?" "I think," Officer said thoughtfully, "that Emma's story could help a lot of other children. If you're comfortable with it, I think we should do it." The interview was scheduled for the following Monday. The news crew arrived at Riverside Park with cameras and sound equipment. Emma, dressed in her favorite pink butterfly dress, stood between Valor and Officer as Jennifer Martinez asked them questions about their journey together. "Emma," the journalist said warmly, "can you tell our viewers what it was like before you met Valor?" Emma's small face became serious. "I couldn't talk," she said clearly. "I was very scared. My mommy was sad because I wouldn't talk." "And how did Valor help you?" "Valor didn't make me scared," Emma explained, her voice steady and confident. "Valor just wanted to be my friend, and when I was with Valor I wasn't scared anymore, and I could talk." The segment aired that evening at 6 o'clock and was rebroadcast at 11. By morning, it had been shared across social media platforms thousands of times. The police department's phone started ringing with calls from parents who had children with similar conditions, anxiety disorders, selective mutism, speech impediments, autism spectrum disorders. Within 48 hours, Officer had received over 100 calls. He immediately set up a meeting with the police captain. Sarah was invited to attend, along with Doctor and Officer, 4 colleagues from the K-9 unit. "We have an opportunity here," Officer told Captain, his commanding officer. "A real opportunity to create something that could help hundreds of children. We need your support to formalize this as an official program." Captain, a woman in her 50s with a reputation for innovative thinking, listened carefully as Officer outlined his vision. The program would be called Valor's Voice, named after the dog who had started it all. It would pair children diagnosed with anxiety disorders and speech impediments with K-9 officers and their dogs. Sessions would be held weekly at a designated community center. Participation would be free, funded through a combination of departmental budget and community donations. "How many officers can we commit?" Captain asked. "5 officers said, Martinez, Jackson, and myself." "That gives us 5 dogs," the captain calculated. "So we can serve approximately 25 children weekly, rotating through the program." "We're hoping to expand," Doctor interjected. "Once we document the clinical outcomes, I believe we can secure grant funding from behavioral health organizations." Captain nodded. "I'll present this to the city council. This is exactly the kind of community policing initiative they want to see. I think you'll have your approval within 2 weeks." She was right. The city council approved the program with enthusiastic support. The local media covered the announcement extensively. Parents began registering their children. By late January, Valor's Voice held its first official session at the community center. 5 K-9 teams were present, along with 15 children and their parents. Emma was there too, not as a participant but as an unofficial ambassador. She moved between the other children, helping them pet the dogs, demonstrating that connection and communication were possible. A 6-year-old boy named, who hadn't spoken in 2 years, sat shyly beside Officer Martinez's dog, Duke. Emma approached him. "Do you want to pet Duke?" she asked gently. "Duke is very nice. He likes when you pet his head." Looked at Emma with fearful eyes, but slowly extended his hand to touch the dog's fur. Within 15 minutes, had made his first vocalization in 2 years, a whispered "good dog" as he stroked Duke's coat. Officer noticed and felt tears prick his eyes. Over the following weeks, stories. A 5-year-old girl named Sophia, who had experienced severe trauma and couldn't be touched by anyone, began to relax her rigid boundaries while interacting with Officer's dog, Storm. Within 3 weeks, she allowed her mother to hold her hand, the first physical contact she'd permitted in over a year. A 4-year-old boy named, diagnosed with anxiety so severe he'd been withdrawn from preschool, began showing up each week with increasing confidence. By the 4th session, he was speaking in full sentences to the officers. Letters began arriving at the police station. Sarah received dozens of emails from parents expressing gratitude for what the program had done for their children. One letter particularly moved her. "Dear Officer and Ms. Mitchell," it read, "My daughter Lily has suffered from selective mutism for 18 months. We tried everything: therapy, medication, clinical interventions. Nothing worked. 3 weeks into Valor's Voice, Lily spoke her first complete sentence to our family in over a year. She asked us to take her to the program every single day. You've given us our daughter back. Thank you for caring enough to make a difference." The local news continued covering the program's expansion. A documentary filmmaker reached out about creating a short film about the initiative. Universities began expressing interest in studying the program's outcomes for their psychology and veterinary medicine departments. By March, the program had a waiting list of 75 families. Officer knew they needed to scale up. He reached out to other police departments in neighboring cities, offering to train their K-9 officers on the therapeutic approach. Within 2 months, 3 other departments had launched their own versions of Valor's Voice. One evening, Sarah found herself sitting with Officer at a city council meeting where they were presenting the program's 6-month outcomes. The data was remarkable. Of the first cohort of 25 children, 18 had shown significant improvement in anxiety symptoms. 16 had developed new verbal communication skills. 22 had shown improved social engagement. None had experienced negative outcomes. City Councilman Dr. Washington, who had a background in public health, stood to speak. "This is extraordinary work," he said, looking directly at Officer and Sarah. This represents a paradigm shift in how we think about therapeutic intervention. I'd like to propose that we expand funding for this program and explore how it might be integrated into our schools and mental health centers. The motion passed unanimously. Emma sat in the audience during the council meeting, swinging her legs beneath her chair, watching the adults discuss her journey and its impact. Officer had asked her to come, wanting her to understand that her story, her courage, her willingness to connect with Valor, had created something much larger than herself. After the meeting, as people approached to congratulate Officer and Sarah, Emma tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Mommy," she whispered, "can we tell the other kids about Valor? Can we tell them that they can find their voices too?" Sarah knelt beside her daughter, this remarkable child who had transformed her own trauma into a gift for others. "Yes, sweetheart, we can definitely tell them that." What had started as one mother's desperate hope and one officer's compassion had evolved into a movement. Valor's voice was now serving children across the region, healing young minds, unlocking imprisoned voices, and proving that sometimes the most powerful medicine isn't clinical. It's the unconditional presence of another living being who sees your pain and simply offers companionship. Emma's silence had become a symphony. The ballroom of the Riverside Civic Center was filled to capacity. 200 chairs had been arranged in careful rows, and nearly every seat was occupied. The annual Police Community Appreciation Gala had been transformed this year. Instead of the usual civic dignitaries and corporate sponsors, the room was filled with families whose lives had been touched by Valor's voice. Sarah sat in the front row, her hands trembling slightly as she smoothed down Emma's dress. A new pink dress, fancier than the butterfly one, with delicate lace details. Next to Sarah sat Emma's grandmother, Emma's speech therapist, doctor, and officer with Valor, who wore a special ceremonial collar for the occasion. It was 18 months since that first Saturday at the park. 18 months since Emma had made her first public sound, that giggle that had cracked open a door that anxiety had locked tight. 18 months of Saturday mornings, of weekly program sessions, of watching her daughter transform from a silent, frightened child into a confident, articulate young girl. The gala's MC, Mayor Washington, stood at the podium and addressed the assembled crowd. "Good evening, everyone. Tonight, we're here to celebrate the heroes in our community, the police officers who serve and protect us every day. But tonight, we're also here to celebrate something even more remarkable. We're here to celebrate the power of compassion, the extraordinary healing that occurs when humans and animals come together with the intention of helping others." The mayor paused, looking directly at Officer and the other K-9 officers seated in the front. "Tonight, we want to honor the launch and success of Valor's Voice, a program that has already changed the lives of over 300 children across our region." The crowd erupted in applause. Sarah felt Emma tense slightly beside her, not from anxiety, but from the excitement and anticipation of what was about to happen. "And now," the mayor continued, "we'd like to invite to the stage the young woman whose courage and determination inspired this entire initiative. Please welcome Emma Mitchell." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She squeezed Emma's hand gently. "You ready, sweetheart?" Emma nodded, her small face set with determination. She stood and walked toward the stage with steady steps. Officer stood as well, and Valor rose beside him, moving to follow Emma. At the edge of the stage, Officer helped Emma climb the steps. The spotlight found her, this small girl in her fancy pink dress, standing at a podium that was almost as tall as she was. A technician quickly adjusted the microphone to her height. Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she watched her daughter step up to address the crowd. Emma gripped the sides of the podium and looked out at the sea of faces. Sarah held her breath, fully aware of what this moment represented. 18 months ago, Emma couldn't speak to strangers. 18 months ago, public speaking would have triggered a complete shutdown. And now, here she was, preparing to address 200 people. "Hi," Emma said, her voice clear and strong through the speakers. "My name is Emma and I'm 4 years old." A gentle ripple of warmth moved through the crowd. "A long time ago, it feels like a long, long time, but officer says it was only 18 months. I couldn't talk," Emma continued, her words measured and deliberate. "I could talk at home with my mommy, but everywhere else I was very scared. My throat felt tight. My words got stuck inside my head. I felt trapped." Sarah watched her daughter, marveling at her poise, her ability to articulate experiences that most 4-year-olds couldn't begin to express. "I was sad," Emma said, her expression becoming more serious. "And my mommy was sad because I was sad. We went to lots of doctors. We tried lots of things, but nothing helped. I was still scared. I was still trapped inside myself." Several parents in the audience were wiping their eyes, recognizing their own children's struggles reflected in Emma's words. "Then," Emma said, and her face transformed with a smile so radiant it seemed to light up the entire ballroom, "I met Valor." Officer's eyes glistened as he watched the child speak about his dog with such pure affection. "Valor is a police dog," Emma explained. "He's very strong and very smart. But the thing that makes Valor special is that he's also very kind. When I met Valor, I wasn't scared. I don't know why. I can't explain it like grown-ups can, but Valor made me feel safe. Valor made me feel like it was okay to be scared and okay to be myself." Emma paused, gathering her thoughts, her small fingers gripping the podium. "I touched Valor's fur and I laughed," she continued. "It was the first time I'd laughed in a very, very long time, and that laugh opened a door inside me. An officer helped me walk through that door, and now I can talk to anybody I want to talk to." The crowd was completely silent, utterly captivated by this small child's profound wisdom. "There are other kids like me," Emma said. "Kids who are scared and trapped inside themselves like I was. They can't talk and it makes them sad and it makes their mommies and daddies sad too. But Valor's voice helps those kids. Police officers and their dogs help kids find their voices again. That's what Valor did for me." Emma looked directly at Officer and Valor, who stood at the edge of the stage. "Officer, I want to say thank you," Emma said, her voice wavering slightly with emotion. "Thank you for being patient with me. Thank you for understanding that I was scared. Thank you for bringing Valor to the park that day. You helped me find myself again." Officer's face was wet with tears. He stepped forward and embraced Emma gently, and the crowd erupted in applause so thunderous it seemed to shake the building. When the applause finally subsided, Mayor Washington returned to the podium. "Emma, thank you for your beautiful words," she said. "And now, I'd like to present Officer and the K-9 unit with a special commendation for their extraordinary work with Valor's voice." Officer stepped forward to receive the award, but before he accepted it, he turned to Emma and lifted her onto his shoulders. Valor pressed against them both, and the three stood together, the officer, the child, and the dog, as the crowd stood and applauded for nearly 3 minutes without stopping. When the ceremony concluded, Sarah made her way through the crowd to reach her daughter. Emma flew into her arms, laughing and crying simultaneously. "I did it, Mommy. I talked to all those people." "You did, sweetheart," Sarah said, holding her daughter tightly, her own tears flowing freely. "You were so brave." Doctor approached them, her professional demeanor softened by genuine emotion. "Emma, you gave a remarkable speech. Your eloquence and self-awareness are exceptional for any age." Later that evening, as the gala wound down, Officer found Sarah and Emma in a quiet corner of the ballroom. "I wanted to tell you both something," he said, kneeling to Emma's eye level. "Valor and I are retiring next year. We're going to start a new program that will train other police departments across the state how to implement Valor's voice. And Emma, I wanted you to know that you started all of this. Your courage, your willingness to try, your beautiful heart, that's what inspired everything that followed." Emma hugged Officer tightly. "Will I still get to see Valor?" Every week, officer promised, for as long as you want to. That night, as Sarah tucked Emma into bed, her daughter reached up and wrapped her arms around her mother's neck. "Mommy, I love my voice," Emma whispered. "I love being able to talk." Sarah held her daughter close, remembering the frightened, silent child from 18 months ago. She thought about the journey they'd traveled together, the desperation, the hope, the breakthrough, and everything that had followed. "I love your voice too, baby," Sarah said. "Your voice is beautiful and it's helped so many people. I'm so proud of you." As Sarah turned off the light, she reflected on the remarkable truth. Sometimes the most powerful healing comes not from clinical expertise or pharmaceutical intervention, but from the simple, unconditional presence of another living being who sees your pain and offers companionship. Emma's voice, once imprisoned by anxiety, had become a gift not just to herself, but to hundreds of other children who were learning that they too could find their voices again. One dog, one officer, one desperate mother, and one brave little girl had changed the landscape of how a community approached childhood mental health. And it all started on an ordinary Saturday morning at a park, when a police dog and a silent child locked eyes and recognized in each other exactly what they both needed. That was the real miracle, not the extraordinary circumstances, but the extraordinary ordinariness of two living beings choosing to connect in a moment of mutual recognition. That was the victory worth celebrating.